we're on the cusp of releasing Gaju mining software as a service, which will allow anybody around the world to install the software and participate in the mining of the Gajumaru blockchain. Easy to say, and was really easy to say back in October when we came to the conclusion that this was the best way of getting as many people as possible engaged in mining before we opened up to public access, and we're continuing to develop the Gajumaru for final release. At that point, we did think it would take somewhere in the region of 2, maybe 3 months at a push to get to this point. And 10 months later, we can confidently tell you that we were totally wrong at the time. However, the upside is we have done something really phenomenal. I say we, I was really just dealing with other dragons whilst these guys tried to slay that particular one. So with that, I'll pass across to the guys to talk about what we did and how we did it. And I think we can also discuss the why we did it.
So I guess we could start with why. We're trying to solve the problem of bootstrapping a currency, and we care about it as a currency. We think about it as a currency. The problem is distribution. How do we start with a fully mined digital asset that is an asset, it's in the asset class because it's fully mined. It doesn't come from somewhere else, doesn't represent anything. It's self-referential, which is the primary innovation of cryptocurrency as currency, is that it's a self-referential form of money. So how do we start with that from zero? No seed wallets, no magic or anything like that. And also get broad distribution, because if we have all the coins, then it's not in circulation, which means you can't do anything with it, and then it's not money. So how do we solve the distribution problem? And also, so that's one problem. Distribution. You have to have broad distribution for a currency to be current. The other problem on the technical side is solving the mining problem, which is that there's no shortcut to blockchain consensus with regard specifically to the minting function of money. The root problem is that the minting function can never be in the hands of a few people.
We had some design choices to make. So it's a little bit like a car. You don't magic cars into existence. You have to build, these days, a subframe to which you attach the engine, the gearbox, everything else. And all of those things have got to be designed, engineered, built. Then you've got to make sure that they all work together as intended. The same is true of anything that requires some engineering, and that is true of a proof of work blockchain. On the one hand, you can't push updates if you go public, because you've got miners who are completely independent of anything and everything you're doing. You've no control over them. You've no ability to push updates and make them implement those updates. Therefore, the chain just begins to splinter. That's issue one. Issue two is actually mining is not easy. It's pretty complex unless you're a nerd. Unless you're somebody who's done these things before, you've got some understanding of computer science. This is not something that I could turn around to any one of our extended friends and family who aren't in the tech industry and go, hey, why don't you mine the Gajumaru? Just start doing it. You know, all you have to do is this long litany of things.
Just type some stuff. It'll work. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. So actually, it's a pretty complex thing that excludes most people from being able to be engaged in it. And then we come to one of the key design decisions in terms of how we made the Gajumaru's proof of work core so efficient, which was about using the cuckoo cycle. And that in turn opened up the capacity for anybody to mine this, certainly at the early stages, with relatively low-end computational tools. In fact, we started the chain itself with a bunch of i5 processors, I think they were, on $300 laptops. 5 $300 laptops is what we started this whole network on. If we mine this, because it's going to be really hard to get people to come in and mine this without being able to force them to accept and implement updates, which we'll be pushing on a weekly basis, then we're going to end up with an awful lot of Gajus, which defeats the entire purpose. We do not want to end up as Satoshi and friends were, with over 40% of the Bitcoin as they did, once it got outside of them and their friends and the people they directly knew, over 40% of Bitcoin had been mined. Now, we have a similar curve, but what we didn't want was for us to go, yeah, us and the people we're friends with have all the Gajus. That's pointless. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that was one of the things that defeated Bitcoin's capacity to be a currency from an early stage, that lack of broad participation, never mind the inefficiency of the system itself. So the solution was to come up with a hive type structure that allowed us to run or to set up the mining operations, and then for people to provide the computational capacity from their computers. So to achieve that, these guys came up with the idea of a software set that could be installed, automatically updated, really install once and never touch it again, extremely accessible for anybody anywhere in the world as long as they had a computer and an internet connection. We needed software that could be installed on a Mac, a Windows machine, or a Linux machine that would allow somebody to participate in mining the Gajumaru. They would have to install it and activate it once, and it would do everything from that point forward, including auto-updating any optimization or development that goes into the software, so that it was really something that anybody, as long as they had a computer and internet access, could install, run, and be part of. That was the design spec. We thought that was because, look, I'm not a techie, and you three have all been building back end systems for a long, long time. This was something that was retail. It was going to go out and engage a retail audience. It had to be the front end as well, and it had to be literally dummy proof.
That was a pretty big challenge by itself across 3 platforms. But the other part of that is, okay, so I don't have the software yet. There's 2 things. You have to have the Gaju mine, that's the miner itself. It doesn't have to know any secrets. It just knows whose account it's mining for, and that's good enough. But then there's Gaju Desk, and Gaju Desk is a kind of over-featured wallet. It's not exactly just a wallet. It's got development features and much other stuff. That's why it's called Gaju Desk. But that is the desktop wallet that we have right now that's published. And from their perspective, coming in and managing a wallet, which is a collection of accounts or key pairs, and then inside of a wallet, they've got accounts that they can create or manipulate or whatever, where that's stored somewhere. People are so used today of not even storing anything on their hard drive. It's just magically whisked away to the cloud. You definitely don't want your private keys saved in one cloud or something. That's no good.
So actually, one of the challenges that we had with this was to make this something that people who were not crypto bros, who didn't know a lot about blockchain, who hadn't used any of the features that Craig was just talking about, to be able to do this with confidence. And for context, Craig turned to me at one point and said, the only other company that's done what we've done is Steam, and they have like 600 developers.
I think the coolest feature that we've got in this particular early crowd is that so many of them are small business owners, because they have actual, like, they do real business, like they provide an actual service somebody pays for, and that's how they make their money. And then they have real legit concern. They're not thinking like, how can I use this money to make this other money and then like trick this other guy to pay me more rates for this other money? Like, they don't do that. They don't think that way. They're like, I have to bring stuff in the door and put it back out in a way that makes profit for me somehow, or I have to provide a service. They have questions that are just like laser focused on, how can I apply this to a real problem I've actually got that's a real thing. It's so refreshing. Like that's the best early adopter crowd, I think, for a project like this, and we really got lucky.
This is probably the one and only chance we have to try and get millions, maybe tens of millions of people into doing this at an early stage, and effectively create something that is akin to a G20 economy on chain. That was the whole point of blockchain. It was about creating an economy for the people, by the people, the distribution in that way, all of those pieces. So when you consider this, and you think, how do we solve that distribution problem? The obvious answer is you get people mining. How do you get people mining when mining isn't easy? And you come back to the idea that the guys had of building the software that would allow anybody to install this on their computers, activate the software license, and start mining. Once people are mining, they have an interest in getting other people on board and trying to get the message out that we're getting this movement for the economic emancipation of humanity underway. Longer term, if those people can be organized into efficient mining pools in their own right and be incentivized to be part of that, we may avoid the state that Bitcoin is in today, which is that 5 accounts do over 95% of all the consensus on Bitcoin, and 2 do more than 51%.
I guess one of the technical reasons that manifests is that in one day, in 24 hours, there's not that many opportunities to even mine a block on Bitcoin. So you have this like collapsing reward problem in Bitcoin in terms of like there's only so many units per day available, whereas we have 720. That gives a lot. The more smooth you can make the mining increments, the more fine tuned it can be. With the smaller your block interval is, the more opportunities there are to win in a day, and that incentivizes the creation of competitive pools because it gives many more efforts a chance to win. So I do think we have a really good chance to have a huge diversity out of this.
That if we solve the distribution problem, we solve the problem of how to get true commercial actors like retail on board. They will be incentivized to chip in and actually invest a little bit of resources into mining to keep the chain stable and honest. So that's what we call defensive mining.
All of a sudden, the incentive isn't just about getting Gajus. That's a nice to have. The incentive is actually about, no, it really helps me to have a business where my cost of operation is so low and where everything is so very simple, straightforward, and transparent, where there are nobody is devaluing my human capital by money printing. There is no tax upon my business efficacy through the fragmentation and fracturing of infrastructure that I have to navigate at risk and at cost.
We cannot find a way to have governance on chain and not have that become a corrupted function at some point. It'll become captured at some point. There's no way to get away from it. So
internally, the 4 of us had a number of arguments over how we should do even a foundation, which is what has been commonly used in the blockchain space, in order to perpetuate the Gajumaru. And the argument actually ended up, the winning argument became, no, there can be none. There can be no governance because any governance leads to corruption. Any governance on a system defines it as infrastructure rather than a resource. In order to be a resource layer, it must have absolutely no governance, and this must be one of the tests of whether it is an actual blockchain that actually works.
We're giving ourselves a limited span of time to be able to do things like updates to the root of the whole system where the minting function occurs, beyond which we will not be able to, unless everyone like agrees to do an update with us, we won't be able to do updates. So we have a limited time, but in that limited time, we need to build up mining power because there's another problem that's as yet unmentioned, which is doing a proof of work blockchain. One of the problems with thinking you can just put a proof of work blockchain in the world now and click your Ruby slippers together and it's all done is that you have predatory mega mining operations that pre-exist already. Entire data centers already built up. There's national efforts behind this that are enormous. The second you put your chain out, you're not going to have ordinary people being able to mine. You're going to have a giant gorilla show up and he's going to be 80% of the mining power. And that one operation is going to consume all the rewards. So your distribution angle just goes away because they're consuming all the reward.
For all of the people who are using the Gajumaru, the incentive to ensure the stability and sanctity of the chain actually is greater than simply the reward of having Gajus. And to some extent, that's what we're hoping to fashion from all of the millions of people we hope to bring into doing this, is that they will continue to do this in the long term because they are part of creating something that they're foundational people within.
But if you're doing business in Gajus, you want to secure the value of Gajus you have by contributing mining power to defend the mint and make sure that it's not subject to capture by some weird predatory guerrillas that show up.
What is whitelist mining? Whitelist mining essentially is where you have a protected mining period. So to be clear, the Gajumaru itself is not something that we have any control of. The blockchain itself, we do not control. It is like Bitcoin with native enterprise grade virtual machines and smart contract language, Fate and Sophia, which we drew from the Eternity blockchain and integrated into this. So we took Bitcoin, made it tens of thousands, and according to ChatGPT, potentially millions of times more efficient than Bitcoin, and then added in those enterprise grade virtual machines and smart contract language, the Sophia, which are excellent pieces of software and code. What that then does is it creates this blockchain as we intend, Groot, the core, where we think that we can develop all of the features within that to the point that it will be a fully functioning, fully operative backbone for a global network of networks. And that's where we see the real innovation going on beyond that, is at these associate chain levels, where sovereign states, major corporations, community groups decide to set up their own associate chains that are linking into the Gajumaru. In order to get to the end point in development, as we've illustrated, that's really about Groot and the tooling that allows people to build whatever they want to build from an associate chain perspective, which is, as I say, is where the real innovation is going to occur in the next 1,000, 5,000 years as we plan this out. So what you can do in order to ensure that you can push updates to the chain as you're going is you can say, okay, we'll just have a very restrictive list of miners. And that's the one piece of control that QPQ has right now. We have the ability to say, you can mine, you cannot. That's our only control function.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the bit to make really clear, is that distinction that the chain itself, we have no control over. We have no ability to influence what it does or how it does it. People coming in and using it can do as they please. We do not gatekeep. We do not put any governance on that. What we do is we restrict the mining access, and that is only for a period of time. And we've made it very clear in all of our documentation and our contracts with people that, look, this is going to go public. Our intention is to make it such that there are millions of people, hopefully tens of millions of people, who are forming into efficient mining pools to either A, continue to benefit from the gajus that they can earn as a result, or B, as Ulf was talking about, the defensive mining aspect, because they have a vested interest in the growth and development and sustenance of the chain, that they would take an interest in ensuring that even if the big commercial miners do come in, they don't get a free run at everything.
All of these things that we've kind of just discussed wrapped together, like how do we finish the development of the system, fund the development, fund the completion of that, which requires fiat because it's a practical issue. Also, make sure that at the end of the development cycle for the core bit, where the minting occurs, make sure that we can, pull out the stop, and governance is no more at that point. So even we can't control anything. There's no foundation that can be coerced or whatever. And get large distribution and so on. How do we solve all these things at the same time with a proof of work chain? That's a tricky problem. So we came up with this whitelist mining period where during that span, we are able to make updates. We can fund ourselves by having people buy licenses to join the hive to mine. They contribute mining power. That raises the mining power. And as the mining power increases, we start approaching that threshold where it's then safe to, at the end, pull the stop out and you're fully public. And you've already got distribution. In that window also, we can start deploying products that are like the basic go-tos any market economy needs, like an online marketplace, a way to invoice people online, like all the basic kind of software services that you would need to transact online. We can go ahead and put those out and have a full offering by the end of that. But how do we create that space? And whitelist mining is the way that we've chosen to do it. Whitelist mining is there's a profit, there's a pay for profit kind of proposition there that funds the development of the chain. But the whole point of this is to fund it to that point where we can pull the peg out, and that's it.
We're going to make it so that everybody who comes in and gets involved in this gets a significant piece of whatever revenue comes in when they introduce their friends. When they bring somebody in that their parent, their brother, their sister, their friend, their work colleague, and that person buys a mining license package, that they can actually come in and say, if they spend 1,000 francs, the person who introduced them might get 200. Now, that isn't to do with multi-level marketing by any stretch of the imagination. It's literally just you make a referral, you get something. And that allows us to build a network through word of mouth. It gives us an army of people out there who know how to install the software, run it, and get it going, who can do that with their friends. This is really about creating that grassroots movement.
This was one of the first dragons that we knew we were going to have to slay. Was somebody comes to gajumining.com, they buy a mining license of whatever size, but they don't have anything yet. All they've got is like, a couple of dollars in a dream, basically. And they show up and they buy their license, and then they get an email and it says like, hey, thanks for, joining our project, and now click here and come get your software. So they go there, and the problem comes in where we know they've bought something. We've got that on record. So we like know their email address, but we can't generate an account ID for them because their true account ID is really, for really real, going to be on the blockchain. We can't generate an account for them on the blockchain because that account ID is part of their key. Their account is one with their key. It's one thing. So they have to generate that on their side and keep the secret. We can't know what that is. So they get the software. Now, GajuDesk can generate accounts for them. They can come up with an account number, but the account numbers are these big, long, crazy, anybody watching this video has probably seen a crypto address before. You're not going to type that in and get it right most of the time. So in copy pasting, it's a little bit fraught. There's a lot of issues. If they give us the wrong account ID, there's no way to check the account ID because it's never occurred on the blockchain before. So we have to verify that we've really got their account ID and that it's the person that bought this. And our backend needs to link those two together so that we assign so all of our mining operation for Whitelist is governed by contracts that are on the blockchain. It's not actually inside gajumining.com. Gajumining.com is kind of an interface for us and for them to be able to kind of deal with the interface with the blockchain in an easy way. All the contract stuff that all the governance for the way that the whitelist mining actually works is on chain. So we have to get their accurate account number, which nobody can know except for them at the moment it's generated, and pair that with what we do know, which is their email address. And we have to match that together some way that our backend can know to insert them into the mining contract and insert them into the hive, the mining hive. And so that means that the user now has a task, which is to generate an account for themselves. And then they need to come log in to gajumining.com. Now, the way that you log into gajumining.com is you do that through a Grids URL. Grids is a system for doing encoding like remote transactions that you can refer to or directly encode into the URL. And then a wallet that can speak Grids can decode that and process the transaction. So we need them to sign.
In English, what Craig is saying is that we've removed the need to use logins and passwords, and we actually make the whole thing a secure exchange between wallets. So the version that he just gave you is the nerd version. The reality is that simple statement. it removes the need to use logins and passwords.
And the second part of that is making the process something that's not completely, impossible for a user who doesn't know any of this stuff yet to use. And that's a big part of where the community knowledge comes in. We've got documentation now that tries to walk people through in kind of a nice way, and we're improving those things. And we've got a big improvement to the process coming pretty soon here, based again on community feedback. We're getting to this kind of nice point now where we've identified a lot of the problems and things are finally working.
What we thought would be the quickest, easiest way to get a website up and running, that people could come into a web store, buy a license, install and run, was WordPress. And with that come a whole pile of plugins that are very well developed for a massive market appeal, most of which relate to Stripe. And it was a very clunky, horrible system that we absolutely hated from the very first moment. But we thought it was the fast way to get where we needed to go. Turned out that was totally wrong. We then bounced through a whole litany of people that all the household names and payments, none of them would touch it, because even though it was software as a service that would enable millions of people to participate in mining, it wasn't a way of selling them crypto. It wasn't, hey, buy this, here's 10,000 Gajus, buy it for 100 francs type thing. It wasn't that. It was buy some software that you can install on your computer with a license that allows you to participate in mining this. And when we get to the end of whitelist mining, by the way, you still will own the software. We just won't be pushing updates, and you can be part of making this all happen. This is yours. That message somehow became crypto adjacent, the antithesis of crypto. All of these things that we looked at in the payments world, the opacity around it, the duplicitousness of so many of the positions was really, I mean, I've spent months on this now, trying to wade through all the different providers around, and remarkable how much of the process is so-called AI driven, large language models, and it doesn't really detect anything until you get to the final boss, as it were. And the final boss goes, oh, actually, you've said somewhere along the way that you're producing software to mine a blockchain. And they then say, well, actually, in our terms and conditions, we exclude mining pools and hardware. I'm like, well, we're not either. It's software as a service. We don't care. The fact that you are almost, or possibly, or linked to, or adjacent to is enough for us to exclude you. Even having worked in banking and talked to people in back offices about how does this work and why does that do this, the amount of game playing and lunacy that goes on within the payments world, unspeakable.
Now, to be fair, building payment rails on top of existing blockchain infrastructures is an absolute nightmare. If only they had Gajumaru fully developed, their service would have been so much better.
That we've gotten as far as we have without a payment solution to date has been absolutely remarkable. And it's a testimony to the faith that the people who've come in have had in us to do this. Now we do have payment systems in place, and we have a fantastic company here in Europe. They're going to work with us. We've got another company over in Singapore that will work with us, and I'm sure others will emerge over time. Most of the things that we've had to do in the last 10 months have been things that you never did before. And actually, it's not just that you never did them before. Nobody else did either. We've literally been breaking new ground in terms of computer science and programming, development, etc. for months. And you've all been doing it in isolation. This, and I'm not a programmer, I'm not a tech person. So you've really been doing it on your own with nothing more than one another as referential points. Because when you go out to the internet, which you could do as a developer, and say, I've got a problem, pretty good chance that everyone else who's doing something like this has had a similar problem, I'll go into the forums and see what people came up with as a solution. That hasn't been a resource that's been available to you guys. So I really think there's a huge hats off to all three of you and the other guys in the background that aren't on this call, Jarvis and Peter Harpending. You've done incredible things with very little resources, and I'm enormously proud to work with you and be part of a team with you. We're getting to see this problem before it becomes a scaled problem. You know, if you get 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people doing this, the scale of that 1% problem becomes huge.
And I think one thing that's important to note as well is that this has really strengthened our conviction that what we are doing at the core is really necessary. So all these mighty dragons have been peripheral to what we are actually trying to do. I mean, like getting rug pulled by payment operators is not something that disqualifies the idea of the Gajumaru. It rather forcefully strengthens, validates the argument.
Yeah, totally validates. I mean, you lift the lid on that lunatic asylum and you think, why has no one fixed this before now? Oh, because lots of people make lots of money out of not fixing it. Okay, well, guess what, guys? You better learn Gaju quick. You know, we talk about the objective of the Gajumaru being the restoration of your economic sovereignty, the creation of a free and open economic resource layer that everything else can operate with and build upon. We're not anti-sovereign states. We're not anti legislation, regulation. We understand that in the real world, all of these things occur. But there is a tension that this is going to prompt between, on the one hand, we say to people, you will own your data, your assets, and your money, which in turn means that your rights become rights, not licenses. This tension on the other side is with a IMF, World Bank, the totalitarian state apparati, who essentially say, well, hold on, money laundering can occur in crypto or can occur in blockchain, without understanding, actually no, because it's transparent. Where the money laundering in trillions of dollars is occurring is in the existing banking system. The reason why you haven't stopped that is too many people do well out of it. But there is a tension coming down the road. But it is going to be a very interesting time where that tension between the statist, the corporatist, and the freedom of the individual have to rebalance. And at the moment, the individual, the sovereign person, natural law, all of these things, they are the sacrificial lamb that is being fought over between the statist and the corporatist sides. Our object is to restore capacity to that and make that an equal actor within that tension and resettlement of the corporate versus state versus person.
I mentioned before that our early adopters, a huge percentage of them are small business owners, and that's fantastic for us. I also mentioned elsewhere that the uncertainty that we encountered the moment we got our first payment processor to clip us like that threw everything into a spiral. On the technical level, on the interpersonal level, we already had people like lined up to buy. We'd already pushed ideas to people, promised things to people. We suddenly couldn't deliver because we couldn't accept payment and so on. Our development requirements just mushroomed at that moment. These are all uncertainty problems, and they trace back to statutory problems. Statutory problems meaning they're invented problems that somebody else had to legislate into existence and then not be clear about. So you have this gray zone that you're operating in. And when you're trying to do anything as a small business that doesn't have an army of lawyers to go, one, grease the rails in sort of a morally gray way, in addition to research what the rules might or might not be, and then test them, subject them to legal tests to figure out if you're even allowed to do what your idea is. You're operating in a world where how much are you going to risk in terms of effort and blood and money and time on an idea, business idea that you've got that you don't even know if you're going to just get like, you set everything up, you build your oven, everything's ready to go, and the next day a regulator shows up to give you an inspection for your new pizza shop that you didn't know existed, and demand license fees from you that you didn't know existed, and demand, just yesterday they made a new city law that you have to pay a business license. All this stuff, if that's the world that you're in, where you don't know what's coming next, and there's no way for you to research what the rules are, and you're operating in a total context of uncertainty, nobody's going to start anything new.
The video in sum has been, we've been absent for a long time because we've been slaying some pretty enormous dragons. We're back. We're going to be doing this more regularly. We will get into these topics in greater depth. We look forward to hearing more from people. We'll evolve this as we go, and we'll bring more and more of the community into these discussions as well. With that, thank you all very much for your time. We look forward to talking to you all again, and keep in touch.